That's always good. Let me share my screen so that I can show you the slides that I have for you today. And we're not a huge group, I think, so we'll see how many people will come, but we were just discussing this beforehand. If you have pressing questions, if something's totally unclear about what I'm saying, feel free to ask, and otherwise we'll have a discussion afterwards in more detail. You can ask me anything. And of course, I'm interested in what you think about this whole thing called selfless leadership. So selfless leadership is just a couple of words. They point to something, and words are never good enough. So as soon as I talk about things and I tell you something or say something like selfless leaderships, you will have associations in your minds, and you will put it in a box and give it a meaning. That's normal. That's what we do as human beings. But we're going to try to undo all of that during this presentation as well. So let's see if we can just kind of speak about this and at the same time keep our minds open and not put anything in too many boxes. Here we go. So selfless leadership and servant leadership. These are two concepts that get thrown around a lot, at least the servant leadership one. And when I just Googled servant leadership today, I got this image. And I think it's typical kind of for a lot of the talk around servant leadership. It's supposed to be about putting others first. But somewhere in the picture is always a very big servant ego. So there's something about the narrative about servant leadership at the moment, which is still, it's very much about the person who is then trying to be in service. And what I'm going to talk about, what I call selfless leadership, is exactly the opposite. So this servant leadership that we hear about now, it's what you could call moralistic or dogmatic. And it says, okay, I don't know, Martin, you're a great human being, but you are not a servant leader yet. So in order to become one, you must develop yourself into a better person, figure out, what your weaknesses are, why you're not there yet, and deal with those. You have to learn and grow. You have to take on and cultivate these qualities and traits. And you have to use your will and your discipline to do this because it's the right thing to do. And here are some great examples of servant leaders that you should emulate. That's kind of the narrative that's going on around servant leadership since Robert Greenleaf started this specific type of narrative in the 70s. The type of leadership, selfless servant, that I'm talking about is not this taking a lowly vegetable, an onion like ourselves, and trying to dress it up into a servant leader hero. It's that is from this dissatisfaction loop where we say, I'm not good enough, I'm just an onion. I need to improve. This causes stress, right? The stress of, I'm not there yet, I need to develop myself. So what we end up with is, I'm missing something, I need to get that. Then we do maybe get it. For example, we learn about empathy, and we are better able to have empathetic conversations with team members. Then momentarily we're happy. We had a great conversation with the team. They've given us feedback that we're more empathetic, but then it just starts all over again because of course we're not there yet. We're not the servant leader yet that we want to be and need to be. So there's this endless dissatisfaction loop going on. The type of leadership that I'm speaking about has to do with a couple of completely different things. It's about realizing that the separate self that we believe we are, so our self-identity, is actually an illusion. There is no self that we need to worry about. And we'll talk about this in detail, so don't worry.
Wow, that's advanced.
We also realize that can realize that everyone you, me, servant leaders, anybody, that we're being lived. And what this means, we'll come to later as well, that there is no such thing as true individual doership or authorship of our lives. Following from those, we can also realize that we are really all connected. There is only connection. And separation from each other is the illusion that we live under and that we operate under, but it is in fact an illusion. And that if we are selfless, if we recognize the selflessness, so there is no separate self and we are all connected, and we are also active in the world, right? We don't go to a cave or to a monastery, but we remain active in the world, then we are necessarily in service to others and a larger whole. And if you haven't read my posts or heard me say this before, we'll get into all of this in detail. But that's kind of the type of, it's a completely different paradigm that I'm looking at servant or selfless leadership from. And another way to say this is in these four insights. So here they are kind of again. The first one is we are being lived. And this has to do with the lack of individual doership and authorship. We're not the micromanagers of our lives that we think we are. Second one is that we are new in every moment. So that this whole set of beliefs we have about ourselves, our identity, is a set of beliefs that we bring into the moment again and again. And we can actually see through that, let that go, and then we are new in every moment. We are without beliefs. Knowing that and seeing that we are also all connected, or there is only connection. In other words, the separation we feel and we operate under is also part of this illusion, the way we operate as human beings on this planet. And following from that, what we really are, our true nature, is selfless and in service. That's what we naturally are underneath the ego. Okay, that was the pictorial version. And we're going to go through each of these four. So just to compare this to this other loop, when we operate from this understanding, we get into a presence, into an awareness loop. And in this loop, we learn that I can look inside myself, I can see the truth within of what we truly are. And then I discovered that I already have all I need for servant and selfless leadership. So it's not something I need to become and strive for. And this brings us to what we really are, which is awareness and presence. And from this state or this peace that we then have, there emerges a natural and more intrinsic desire to be in service. It's not this, I need to do this, I need to be the servant hero, go out and serve everyone. It's just a very natural, very easy being in service to the world. And this is the joy and meaning that we're actually looking for. So this is a completely different paradigm, different way of pursuing something, namely not pursuing it at all, but discovering it within ourselves. So what do I mean by leadership? Because this is also something, I'm not talking about a leader. I'm talking about anyone, any person who takes the lead. And that's you, that's me, that's everyone at a certain point in time. So when they're in a specific position, role, or task and putting themselves and their actions in service to others by taking the lead, and they're not aiming for personal benefit, then that to me is selfless or servant leadership. So I'm not talking about the CEO who now suddenly serves the team. Could also be a selfless or servant leader at some point. But I'm talking about the act of leadership, which is available to everyone in any role, as long as we take the lead and put ourselves in service to others. So that's an important distinction I want to make. The second one is that service, selfless service, is what I feel is the heart of servant leadership. So it's not, it's really being selflessly in service to others. And as we just, in these loops kind of show that it's not something you need to cultivate or achieve. It's our true nature beyond when we are able to see beyond the ego and the idea of being a separate self. So the whole cognitive mind thing that's going on, the striving and the becoming ends. It can end. And what is left is more a leadership from the heart. So it's an openness, and it's a being in service to others from our natural being, from who we are. Different than the current narrative. So really what we're talking about is jumping off the carousel of selfing. And by now you probably, I don't know, you might think I'm a bit crazy saying that the separate self is a construct and something that, an illusion and something that we create. But I'm not alone in saying this, and it is possible to see this directly for yourself. So we're going to be talking about some ways of looking at this, looking at reality, looking at ourselves, to find out that we create the separate self, the person we think we are. So me, I believe I'm a separate person with a specific history, with specific traits, a personality. And of course, in my experience, that is the way it is. I'm not denying reality here. We're not saying I'm not here. But what we're going to talk about is how we construct the identity and the ego as an illusion, as a kind of a mirage, a self-construct in the brain. So it's a mental construct that we start constructing at the age of around 18 months and then solidify over the course of years and decades. And everybody does this. It's not wrong, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but there's the opportunity and the possibility to see that for the construct that it is. We'll get into it. So the key to for me to selfless leadership, which is the version I think of servant leadership that should be out there, is this selflessness, but literally selflessness. So I don't mean being unbelievably humble in the selfless sense. I mean literally being able to see beyond your self-construct. So when you can do that, then you are naturally much less interested and stuck in this cage of ego, because you've seen that you're more than that. You've seen that this is only a limiting construct. And when you are able to be selfless, when you see that that is actually the case, you're no longer so interested in this self and in self-protection, self-promotion. And so you are automatically more in service to others. It's what remains of what we do. If you're thinking this, this is a bit like awakening, enlightenment, various Buddhist approaches, Zen, Advaita Vedanta, for those who have heard this. All of these wisdom traditions point to the fact, have been pointing to that for centuries, that the separate self that we believe, so humans and their separate ego self, that is an illusion. And that is something that we can transcend and understand that it is an illusion. Transcending means only to see that this is a construct, nothing more. So this is the transformation that can take place, that we as human beings believe first the world revolves around me. It's my experience. It is, what are you doing to me? How can I get my needs met? Becoming a servant leader is about me and being seen as a better person. What can change is that this red dot in the middle, it doesn't disappear. So in that sense, this visual is wrong. But in your understanding, it can disappear in the sense that you can see through this construct. And I believe this is something that is currently happening, that more and more people are seeing this, the limits of the ego, the limits of the construct of the separate self, and that this is available to everyone, which is why I wrote a book about it. So what does that shift really mean?
I'm coming up.
It means that before you're thinking, everybody, right? Everybody grows up to wonder, how can I satisfy my needs, wants, and desires? And these can be super good desires. We're not judging here. It's not that you want to satisfy needs and desires doesn't mean it has to be, world domination or something negative. It can be just, I want to be a good person. I want to be in service to the world. These are also needs and desires. You normally, if you're a separate human being in this world, you believe your thoughts. You believe what they tell you. You believe that if they say you're not good enough, you believe this. If you've learned the belief that people are out to get you, or that agile transformations are the answer to everything in organizations, then you believe these thoughts. So obviously we don't believe everything we think, but there's a set of beliefs and thoughts that we have taken on and have become part of our identity. And they're nothing more than beliefs. So we experience ourselves as separate people, a separate personality, a separate character, and that we are limited to what we believe about ourselves. And this puts me in a constant struggle with reality, because reality doesn't care what you think and doesn't care what you believe. It just is. And so all of us experience again and again points in time where that what is happening is not to our liking. What other people are doing is not to our liking. And this is where we limit ourselves, where we struggle. So we create stress, worry, effort. It's never enough, and there's a sense of lack. And this is just the normal human situation. The Buddha called it suffering. And suffering in when we say suffering, it sounds, like something really bad has to be going on. You could also just say it's a general sense of uneasiness, of it's not good enough the way it is. So remember, the dissatisfaction loop. That's basically the type of suffering we're talking about. We want more. We want it to be different. We want to be better. We're not good enough. We all want to be servant leaders or selfless leaders. So there's this vague sense of the way it is now is not okay. And here I'm only talking about ourselves, but we have this, towards other people as well. You're not good enough. You're not saying the right things. You're not the way I want you to be. I don't like you. So we have this going on all the time, and this causes stress, permanent stress. When we make this transformation, which is just a question of seeing or unseeing a couple of false beliefs, we can have we have a natural selflessness. So again, it's not in the sense of I'm now extremely humble and become a doormat for people. It's that I've seen just the illusion of the separate self, and in that sense, understand our true nature, our core, that we're in that sense selfless. So my thoughts, the thoughts that I have, the beliefs that I have, things I've learned to, that have become part of my identity, that I should have a morning routine, that it's important to use willpower and discipline to achieve things, that projects should always be finished on time, that the customer is king. All of these different beliefs, again, we're not judging them as good or bad. They can be extremely helpful, but there are many that are unhelpful. And when we've seen this selflessness, that we're not a separate self, we don't have to believe them anymore. In that sense, we're free from free from believing our beliefs. And this leads to a much more, this limitlessness, because we're not stuck in this cage of self, and more of a sense of connectedness between ourselves and others. More acceptance of reality and the corresponding ease and flow and peace that brings. Okay, so far I've just been telling you things, but back to these 4 insights, because seeing these 4 insights, so what I'm saying is that these are more the truth of our reality, and that it's possible for you to see this in your direct experience. So not because I've just been preaching at you or telling you something, but because you look within and use your own experience, your own intelligence to find this out for yourself. So that's kind of the how-to behind this. And we'll get to that at the end. But just so you know, nothing I say here is meant as this is the truth and please now accept it. It's all meant as a, this is a different way of looking at things. Perhaps this might be true. Who knows? Let's see. Let's find out. So what I'm doing here is looking at 4 beliefs that we have, or 4 insights, the blue bubbles. And at the moment, we believe certain illusions that stop us from seeing that. So the first one, that we are being lived, means we're not really in control. Okay, so we'll get to this in detail in a second, but what we believe now is, I have a life. This is my life to live. I'm in control of it and responsible for it. And various degrees, right, of this. So even going into, I'm responsible for what I think, I'm responsible for my actions, my thoughts, etc. Second one is, we believe that we are, as I said, our identity, our beliefs and conditioning. The truth behind that is, no, we are actually completely beliefless, new, identityless in every moment, if we want to see that. We are separate is what we believe now. We are connection is the truth behind that. And seeing these leads to this selflessness, this understanding of selflessness, which is service to others. And that's kind of the framework behind this. And we'll be filling it in and going through these different parts so that hopefully by the end, it might make sense or not. We'll see. So the first one, we are being lived. And what we believe now, we are in control of and responsible for our lives. And I think you've all seen these type of circle of control things on various graphics, illustrations. And this is a good illustration of that. So I see them regularly on social media. There's a circle of control, and people are saying, don't worry about what you can't control, but do worry, worry a lot about what you can control. And what is in that area of control is something like the list on the left: thoughts, feelings, my words, my behavior, my decisions, my mindset, my attitude. And this is just, it's put in this circle of control and said, that is something, you control your thoughts, for example. You control your behavior, you control your words. But this is very interesting, because if we look at our experience, it is absolutely clear with just a little bit of looking that we do not control our thoughts and we do not control our behavior. So when I look, this is a graphic I found on the internet of how we can improve ourselves. Okay, so there's various, you can do self-change if you just, this is going back to this dissatisfaction loop, right? If we just figure out the goal and then we strive and monitor and then do some self-regulatory processes and then increase our self-awareness and self-reflection, then we understand the gap and then we can improve. This is thinking of ourselves as machines, kind of, or I don't know, a bunch of software, and we're the software engineer and can go in there and fix things or improve them. And the whole area, lots of psychology says, well, yeah, there are ways to do that, right? Become self-aware, self-reflect, as it says here in the graphic. Go in there and fix yourself, improve yourself. But what I'm saying here is that this may be a faulty assumption, because the assumption is that there are all these levers and dials somewhere in ourselves that we have control over, that we can go in there and turn them. So take thoughts, for example. We somehow, there is somewhere a possibility for us to go in and control thought. Think better thoughts, think more positive thoughts. Think the thought that I should have a morning routine, and starting tomorrow I'll get up at 5 o'clock and implement all these things. So we just assume that this is the case, that this is possible. It's put in these circles of control. We speak as though it's the case. You should improve your thinking. There's all these things we say to each other, and we believe that's true. So another way to see this, the way we think of it now, is that we have hardware, the body, and there's a brain in there somewhere. And this has an operating system, which is the mind. And then there are various applications, which we'll just call thinking for the moment, but of course, it's much more complex than that. And we assume that at some point in here, we can go into the applications and rewrite the code, or delete applications, download different ones, do something, right? But the question behind all of this is, who is in control of that? Is that a separate person within you who goes in and optimizes the thinking? So is there a software engineer in you that can go in and rearrange your software? I would say that no, there isn't. You can't go in inside yourself and fix yourself. It looks that way. It looks that way because sometimes behavior changes and sometimes thought patterns change, and they sometimes correspond to things that we've done. So, and at a certain level, yes, we can change things. But ask yourself this now: where does my next thought come from? So you can watch, you can look at your mind right now. Where does your next thought come from? And this is one way of seeing, and there are many other ways that show that we have no idea. I mean, thoughts just appear. They simply pop into our heads. And the thought might appear, oh, well, I can optimize my thoughts, or I'll have better thoughts starting tomorrow. And then, you know, in a certain area, from starting tomorrow, I'll be more present in meetings. And then look, lo and behold, tomorrow I am more present in meetings. But we forget conveniently the multiple times that we think something and then we don't do what we think. So say you go to the supermarket to buy milk and you come home with chocolate. This happens all the time, but this is then unconscious thinking, and there's psychology in play and stuff. So we turn the arguments to fit what's happening. So what this is saying, what this is pointing to, is that we're how we think and how thinking corresponds to actions is much more mysterious, much less under our control than we usually assume and usually talk about. And behind that is the idea. So what I would say in the sense is more the truth of existence, that what we are is a bunch of unconscious and conscious processes that are running. But there is no separate software engineer in there, no separate person that goes in, that can go in and do the person. So I am being lived, various processes are running, thinking processes are running, software is running, but there is no separate self in there that is in control of that. Okay, so this is one way of looking at that. Again, this is not meant to be the final proof. It's just looking at different layers, looking at, oh, okay, maybe it's not precisely how we've been told or how we commonly assume life is. So this is something that people also, another way of looking at this is saying there's something like a flow state. And that means, this is one visual of that when you have very high skills in something and you have and the challenge is high, then you can create this flow state where you are running, you know, you're not thinking about things, it's all flowing. There's no doing, there's no pressure, there's no stress, it's just things are simply moving. What this insight, this that we are being lived, that our lives, our bodies, our minds are simply a flow of processes in the universe, as a tree is a process, as a cat is a process, as a plant is a process. We are not different from nature. in that sense. So that flow is not a state in that sense, something we need to achieve, but actually what is underneath everything when we let go, when we stop believing in this sense of I need to control my thinking, or I even can control my thinking, or the other things on those lists. So this aspect of we are not the doer, we are not the authors of our lives, but thoughts appear, actions appear on this complex system that I am as a human being, means when I let go of this idea that I need to control things, that I even can control things, my thinking, my actions, what remains is the flow state, is flow. Because then thoughts are being thought, right? The thought comes up and action is done. You sit at your computer in the morning and the thought arises, let me write an email. Maybe there's no thought, maybe just the email is opened and the email is written. The thought comes, I need to call person X. The question here is, do you need to do those things? Do you need to create these thoughts? Do you need to make this stuff happen? The actions of the body and the thinking of the mind? Or is it perhaps more accurate to say that all of this happens spontaneously? You don't have to do thinking. You don't have to do work. So it's a shift of perception, and all of these insights are a shift in understanding. It doesn't change anything. You don't suddenly now start living in a flow state, because that's not what we're talking about. But seeing this even a little bit starts to change your, oh, okay, maybe it's not so clear. Maybe it's not the way they told us. Maybe it's not so easy to say, control your thinking, control your actions. Maybe the truth is a little bit different. So what I'm doing here is just trying to point to that a little bit, because really going into this, it would take a little bit longer, but I'm trying to poke little holes in the bubbles. So what could that mean? We are being lived. It can mean that we can stop all these attempts to manage and control what is going on. You don't even know where your next thought is going to come from. You don't know what you're going to think in 3 seconds. You have no idea. So why would you need to, or even want to, control? Put your personal agenda on what reality is doing. No, it's not good if this happens. It needs to be something else. But who would control that? Where would you find this control mechanism? So seeing this, even a little bit, allows you to naturally flow, to naturally accept what is already happening. There's much less struggle against life and work and other people. So we do a bit less of this pushing and pulling on the system and everything that's happening to us. That's what can be behind this insight. So what that means in terms of leadership, if you have a leader who really understands, someone in a leadership role who really understands, hey, we are all being lived. I don't need to micromanage my thinking or your thinking or actions and behaviors. There's a natural discovery of flow, presencing, foresight, a lot more agility, because no, we don't have to follow my plan, because we follow whatever plan emerges. Serenity, wisdom, these types of aspects that everybody wants, right, to cultivate, the servant leadership stuff that we saw, that we see people striving for, wanting to achieve. It's there if you can have this internal shift of thinking, of understanding. So an impression of what is possible with this first insight. This is very counterintuitive for how we've been raised and how we've been conditioned, because our society tells us you are in control, or at least you need to be in control. If you're not in control, get with the program, do something because you should be. So there's a big gap between this insight, which is more recognizable from Eastern traditions, and as I said, Buddhism, than the way we currently operate. The second one, we are new in every moment, is sometimes a lot easier to accept because we've heard this more often already. So we've heard more often that we are not our beliefs, right? And we know we've learned many limiting beliefs. And the narrative, the societal narrative, even at work, is now it's becoming more normal for us to say, well, I have limiting beliefs, or these are beliefs about myself that don't serve me. Then we talk about mindset shifts, right? So this is becoming more normal to speak about this. However, this concept goes even further. So it says that your whole ego, I mean, the whole concept, self-identity, self-concept, what we could also call the ego, not in the narcissistic sense, but just your self-identity, is nothing more than a set of beliefs. It is simply a set of beliefs that you started accumulating as a small child, and some have disappeared. You don't believe what you did as a 10-year-old. Some have stayed the same. You've added many onto them. And we all have intuition of this because we know the older people, 70, 80-year-olds, who are so rigid in the meantime in their sense of self that, no, that's not the way I am. I can't do that. I can't travel because I don't do that. Or I can't do this. I can't do that because that's not me. We see this progression often in these beliefs becoming more and more solid and the identity more limiting. It doesn't have to be that way, of course. It can also go in the other direction. But often the set of beliefs becomes more rigid and more claustrophobic as we age. Nevertheless, whatever it is like, even if it's a bunch of really nice beliefs, it is in some sense limiting because you are saying, well, this is me and this is not me. I'm a woman. I'm bad at maths. I am interested in new work processes. I'm interested in new meeting formats, whatever. You're saying something about yourself and thereby automatically excluding the rest. Again, it's not good or bad. It's just looking at things. The core belief, it's like a house of cards, right? We build up our identity on this whole house of cards, and there are beliefs that are more crucial to our identity than others. The one major belief being, I am a separate person. Not just there is a body and there are thoughts, but this particular body and these particular thoughts constitute a separate psychological self. And yes, they do, but only in here. And you can see this if you look at a small baby, for those of you who have children or even those who don't, we've seen this. You have to teach a child, you have to teach a baby that it is a separate self. You have to teach it to the child. Before that, it is just consciousness. It doesn't know it doesn't believe it is in a body and limited to a body, to a separate self. It doesn't identify with the self. It has to learn that. That's interesting that we have to learn that. So these beliefs, going back to these beliefs, these actually also create suffering, many of them, and now often called limiting beliefs. But these are what I call first and second layer suffering that we all have because we all have beliefs. So there's basically the blue at the bottom, there's just reality. Team meeting, for example. First layer is judging what is. I should be more assertive in team meetings. I'm not being assertive. Oh no, I'm bad. Something's not okay. I should be a servant leader in meetings. I'm not doing that. I'm not good enough, etc. Right? So the belief causes this first layer of judging. Reality, I judge it. First layer of suffering also. I'm not okay with it. Should be different. Then we human beings do this crazy thing of judging the judgment. And that's where it gets really interesting, because then like, oh, I should be beyond this. You know, a real servant leader wouldn't worry about this. A real servant leader would know how to solve this. Whatever it is that's going on in our brain, second layer of suffering. We judge the judgment. And then some people even judge the judgment of the judgment. So we get into all these layers of how reality should be, assessing it, and this causes our stress and what the Buddha would call suffering. But all of this is optional. And that's what this illusion is, or this insight is pointing to. You don't have to believe your beliefs. You don't have to believe the thoughts occurring in your head. This is actually optional. So for some people, this is a completely new concept. You don't have to listen to the voice in your head. No, you don't have to take it seriously. When I discovered this, I mean, at the age, I think I was 32 or 33, it sounds so simple, but it was unbelievably shocking. There were deep beliefs I had about myself. I suddenly realized this is just a belief. I learned it somewhere. I do not have to believe this. It's optional. I don't have to believe anything about myself if I don't want to. For some people, this is mind-blowing. So this ego or self-concept can become much more porous, much less of a cage that we're stuck in. I'm not a good leader. Well, who knows? Maybe I am. Maybe that's just a belief. I need to do this or that. Who knows? Right? So the identity becomes more fluid and less of a cage that we're stuck in and that limits us, less rigid. Turn it around, we also, of course, judge other people less. People should never hand in their projects late or whatever. Whoa, that's a belief. Who says? Right? We become more flexible towards others and less judgmental of others, combined with the first insight that they also are just being lived. They're just doing their thing. They're just software running on hardware, as we are. So a lot of this judging and this is not how the world should be can dissolve, and that frees the mind. And only a free mind can really serve others, because otherwise, if you're stuck in your beliefs, you're either judging yourself or the other person. And that means you can't really be freely in service to them or give of yourself. So that blocks what we really are. So right now, take a look for yourself. If you don't think or you don't believe the thoughts, the beliefs you're currently having, can you find a problem? Do you have any problems? If you don't believe a single thought you're having right now, is there anything wrong with reality? Have a look. Anything you come up with is a thought. Anything just is like, this is taking too long, or I don't get this, or what is she talking about? Or I wish I was having dinner, or my foot hurts, or whatever it is. It's a thought. Yes, sometimes there are sensations involved, but the sensations in themselves, for example, a foot hurting, the hurt itself is not a problem. You have to have a thought about it to make it into a problem. So see the world that opens up, the possibilities, the falling away of limitations if believing thoughts becomes optional. Very interesting. And in leadership, it means that we start to see how absurd it is to judge others, because it's either their beliefs running or our beliefs. They're just believing their beliefs. Everyone can just be who they are, what they are, and we don't have to judge them. We don't have to believe the beliefs we have about them. So we can work together, collaborate outside these cages of belief and identity. And that also means that things are no longer so personal. If you say to me, I have no idea what you're talking about, this is the biggest nonsense I've ever heard, I need to believe that this says something about me, that this is in some way important for me, to be hurt by it. Otherwise, it's just some words coming out of your mouth. You see that? We have to give it meaning. And to give it meaning, we need to believe a belief. And again, I'm not saying all beliefs are bad. This is not a good, bad type of thing. It's just seeing how it works. And seeing how it works allows you to be freer of it, from it. Okay. The next two, I mean, these are the first two. We are being lived and we are new in every moment. These are really the core of what constitutes our identity. And that's why seeing them takes a bit longer to explain, and seeing them can cause really, really big shifts. This shift in the sense of leadership outcomes, it has a lot to do with everything we're looking for in teams: psychological safety, high performance, collaboration, true co-creation and collaboration. If we're no longer stuck in our beliefs about ourselves and other people, imagine the type of collaboration that becomes possible. Innovation and creativity only possible if you're not stuck in thoughts or beliefs. Every creative idea comes from outside of thinking, discursive thinking. Ask Einstein, anybody who's creative. It all came out of nowhere, not from thinking. So these two, they actually point already to the fact that if we're not so much a separate self, if we're not a separate psychological self stuck in our little cages, what are we? Well, actually, we are connection. So what we learn to believe, because we're always thinking and believing this thinking and seeing ourselves and experiencing ourselves as separate, we forget that what we really are is connected. There is only connection. And in the same way as you read the words on a page, you forget, you blend out the white of the paper, right? You're only looking at the words. In the same way, as you see objects as discrete different objects, you forget that the whole thing is just a bunch of pulsating energy. We create the distinctions. Again, we have to learn as children, this is a tree. Here the tree ends and it's no longer a tree. They're concepts created in our minds. Before that, there's just reality. So I don't mean, when I say we're all connected, I don't mean in the networked sense. Yes, we're all 7 degrees away from each other and fun stuff like that. So of course we're connected through the internet. That's one way of looking. I mean it even deeper, in a deeper sense. And the second deeper layer you could say is systemic, in the sense we're all influencing each other. We're part of a system. A system is a living organism. We're part of nature and all that. Yes. But even further, there is only connection. So I know nothing about quantum physics, but I do know, or I have heard, that basically there is only energy. There is only energy, and we create the discrete objects in through our perceptions, but our perceptions are not the truth. They are an interpretation of what is out there. And in the same way, yes, we operate as separate individuals with our own thoughts. I can't think your thoughts or feel your feelings. So I have my experience, but there is no separation between us in the sense of that I can't find a border between you and me. Where do I end and you begin? Well, that's a construct. That's a concept where I end and you begin. Really, there is only an exchange of atoms, energy, pheromones, all sorts of things going on. So we cannot really, even intellectually, really say that we are separate. But we act as though we are. We tell each other, that was my decision, forgetting the influence of millions of variables, from the air I breathed to the food I ate to the people I spoke to yesterday, all influencing this organism in connection with each other. So if we would see a bit more of that and not focus so much on this individual separation, we would see the world differently. So if you look right now, you can try this as well. If you just look at what you're experiencing right now, as though there were no separate objects. So just everything that's appearing now, for me, that's, for you probably as well, a monitor and talking heads and pixels and the room. Imagine you've never learned the name for any of that, for discrete objects. Then where is the separation between things, between people? You can't actually, unless it's a concept, unless it's a thought, you cannot find the separation between one thing and the next. And that in itself is just, again, it's you know, we're not pointing to the way we perceive things is wrong. It's just, oh, okay, maybe it's more complex. Maybe it's more interesting, more deeper or different than we've been taught. That's actually why I used this graphic on the cover of my book, because I was trying to also point to the fact that leadership is about, so this seeing through the separate self and discovering connection in this network, more than in this network sense, in the sense of one being, really, one universe. So from a leadership point of view, that would mean that the idea of separation is false. And it's not so necessary or even possible to protect our self-interest or promote ourselves, because that's not something we can cut off, right, from the influence of other people or just our surroundings. And then that allows true compassion to emerge, because then it's no longer so much you versus me. It's just, it's us as a unit, as an organism. In terms of outcomes, much more compassion, trust, because you are me and I am you at that level. Belonging, motivation, engagement, co-creation, all these things that, again, we want and we try to coerce people into now, and we try to design organizations that support this. It's available within if we just look differently. So these three, they lead to selflessness. They lead to a natural selflessness and therefore effortless service if you see these shifts. So it's a question of looking differently, of understanding something and not of trying to become something new. And that's possible. If you're interested in that, if you would like to look, it's possible to, I don't expect you to believe any word of what I say, but you might be interested in it, in finding out, oh, is that maybe true? Well, then you can find out. That's possible. So it leads to the what I just said, that we are, as underneath the ego, underneath these illusions, we actually are selfless service already. It's already there. It's something we can uncover. We don't have to become Gandhi or a saint or all these different ideals we have. We don't have to become those, strive to be that. We are it already if we look inside. So we see that selflessness is what we are. And that's a completely different, non-moralistic way of looking at servant leadership, selfless leadership. This is the whole overview. That's why I'm skipping. That becomes the framework. And what I briefly want to talk to you about is that what I just was pointing to already, this is not something to believe. And people explain this much better than I can. There are books about this that are super eloquent that I will never write. What I was interested in, and what I'm interested in sharing with you, is yes, you have to hear these things to even become interested in them, because everybody's talking about something else. But you can do practices or exercises, self-inquiry exercises, that are really using your reasoning and looking at direct experience, a bit like the exercises, the mini exercises we did together. You can look inside yourself at your experience, basically, of reality. And as Jung already said, the possibility there is to awaken from the dream if you look inside. It's possible for everyone, but we do need to learn how to look, because we're so used to reading information, thinking about it, and then using our thinking to answer, to find out. But thinking is always old. It's always something you read somewhere else, or that you were conditioned, or that you learned when you were 10, or that your teacher told you. The thoughts you have in your head are limited. So we need a different way of looking, which is at direct experience and asking ourselves some questions. So you could say it's a type of science of the self. I look, for example, the exercise we did, where does thinking actually come from? And we don't try to rationalize it to ourselves. We don't try to explain what we've read somewhere. Well, yeah, that's the brain creating thoughts, and the brain is something in the head. No, we look in direct experience. Where does my next thought come from? Well, I don't know. I have to say, I don't know. It just appears. I don't experience a brain. And again, we're not trying to undo science or anything like that. We're just looking at a different level and proving and disproving certain things to ourselves. So what we're doing is moving from the world out there, the sense perceptions, inside to thoughts, feelings, and sensations, and looking even behind those. What is it? What part of me is the observer? The part that actually experiences all of this. There's a part of me that experienced my life when I was 10, when I was 15, and that's still experiencing my life right now, although everything in my reality changed. What is that part of me? This is a nice visual overview of 16 of these types of practices that are in my book. And the ones that I found most accessible, I've tried to describe them in without using any weirdness at all, just really for anybody who is willing, who has an open mind, to try them and to look for themselves. Is this true? Is it not true? Let me find out for myself. Let me see. Let me check. I can do that. And that's the book. And that's me. So this was my overview of a huge topic in the sense that it's a different way of looking at reality, different way of thinking. And I hope you have some questions for me.
Well, that was really interesting. Thanking you. Can I invite anybody to unmute if they do have any questions for Katrijn?
I shock everyone into silence.
Well, that's unusual for this group.
Hi, it's Carrie here. I have a question, Katrijn, if I may.
Yes.
Hi, firstly, thank you so much. This is a topic I feel we could discuss endlessly because there are so many points of view and different levels of consciousness. So thank you. Something I am, and it's maybe a little bit selfish to bring this to the table, but I genuinely welcome your views on this. For some time now, I have been, I suppose, challenging myself to get to this space where servant leadership is not something you are doing, but it just becomes part of who you are. And I think that will be a constant struggle, because even if you find a sweet spot yourself, the outside influences from society, from your organization, from the people around you to behave in a different way are always present, and we're not perfect either. But I find myself in a situation now where I'm looking around and seeing with real genuine pleasure so many people around me who I know I have played a part in lifting up, in raising up, in becoming the best that they can be, either at work or at home, or preferably both, by being in true service to those people. And I'm finding myself now in a situation where I'm like, oh, I think I might have forgotten about myself. So it's great to see all of that success. But how do you feel we find the balance between being truly in service to those around us and not losing sight of the hopes and aspirations and desires that we have for ourselves? Or is what you're saying that those become obsolete if you're truly in that space?
Yeah, you kind of answered your own question, I guess. Yes, at a certain level, the body and the person, if you really let it do its thing, so if you really understand I am being lived, it also takes care of itself, and self-care actually becomes more important for many people, because they were doing the selflessness stuff and serving others as a thing to do, right? So this is something from an ego, from a separate self standpoint. Well, this is my character. This is how I should be. They were following a belief or a should. And when you let all beliefs go, including what it means to be in service to others, then it is naturally balanced, because then you will care. It just, these questions don't come up anymore. That's I think the best way to put it.
Yeah, I'm feeling like it's maybe a little bit like action logics, where as you go through that journey, you kind of transcend that level of consciousness. Like, oh, hang on a minute, someone's asked me a question. If I were being a servant leader, how would I, or a selfless leader, how, oh no, I shouldn't say that. Actually, what I should say is this. Then that becomes more natural, but you're still kind of, you're conscious that that's what you're trying to strive for. And then it just becomes who you are and what you do. So it's like a journey. Yes,
it's a journey of undoing and unbelieving.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example. I used to believe a lot of things about coaching, for example. This is what you do as a coach. This is how you're supposed to be. You're supposed to listen a lot and talk less, and all of these, different kinds of beliefs that were in and of themselves may be true and helpful. Now in a coaching conversation, I don't listen to any of those. They sometimes still come up, but they're just not relevant anymore. So what I do in a coaching situation is just what flows, and there's no judgment about it.
Do you think you get to that point because do you think you need those structures and processes to start with to almost do them up, to be able to then become more conscious, to be able to then start to undo them in a positive way?
Honestly, I don't know.
No, me neither. You can tell my brain is going ping, 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 ping. It's fascinating. So I'm not going to hog all the question time and airtime, but thank you. I find all of this really fascinating.
Thank you.
Excellent. Lots to reflect on. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just had a question. I mean, I saw a lot of parallels in what you were talking about with the kind of Buddhist practice of emptiness. And I don't consider myself a Buddhist, but I do go along to sort of sessions at the Buddhist temple and so on, because I find it really quite helpful. So I sort of a lot of alignment there. But so I'm just kind of interested in, you talk about these 16 practices, and in I guess my key question is, do you actually believe anyone can become a selfless leader? Because in Buddhism, very few of us go on to become actual Buddhas. So it is a constant practice of those methods. So is that, I'm actually on Amazon looking at your book, so I will go read more, but I'm just curious whether this is something that is a practice in the sense of you keep practicing, and actually you don't become a true selfless leader, but you almost, I suppose, tend towards it, that's something. And then I go, well, okay, but then are you striving towards it? And I know in Buddhism they talk about not grasping, so it's like you're not going to try and grasp being a selfless leader. But yeah, so my key question is, can you actually become a selfless leader, or is it a practice?
Yeah, so it's different in that sense, that I call them practices, but they're actually just inquiries. So they're exercises, and you practice them in the sense of you look at them until you see what they're pointing to. So in that sense, it's different from a Buddhist practice, for example, in that you need to cultivate something or become. practice in that sense that you do and do and do and you incrementally improve. This is, yes, everybody can see selflessness because it's our true nature. It's the truth underneath the reality we believe. So these exercises or practices are meant to point you to that. So for example, you look at, as we said, the last part, what is it that is actually observing my life, that is observing my thoughts, observing my experience? And you do this practice, complete the exercise until you've seen that so clearly that you know, and you can go to the next exercise. So in that sense, they have a clear endpoint, and they're not practices in the sense of you'll be doing this for your life, or for many lifetimes. The program, when I do this in coaching, it takes 7 weeks. And most people see all of this in this 7-week period.
So that's good, and I will go read your book. I guess the key question is, in Buddhism, they would see selflessness, emptiness, as being something that was achieved by very few people, and we call those people Buddhas. Is it possible that people truly become selfless, or is it really more about understanding that selflessness is the true nature, and therefore using that to help you, rather than becoming selfless?
Yes, it is. The thing is, there are two ways to approach this. One is we cultivate qualities, and this is the Buddhist path, right? We look at what is a selfless person like. Well, they have to have ethics and right thinking. They have to meditate to achieve this in some future time. This approach, it says exactly as you say, we learn to see, to understand our true nature, which is emptiness, selflessness. And then we see this directly. We see, that's already the case. We understand that, and that shifts how we experience life. And then life continues to bring up problems and continues to bring up different issues for us to deal with that we can test this understanding of selflessness against. So then it's taking on the attitude of, okay, I've seen this, I know this. Now I'm going to deal with life from this point of view, from this new understanding. So it's a different way of approaching the same thing. And I like this approach better. I mean, I've explored the Buddhist path because it's just so democratic and it's so direct. It's, look, this is what is. You can see it now. You can understand this now. And it's much easier to practice or to be selfless, to become that more and more when you've seen the truth first.
I'm very interested. I don't know what I was quite expecting tonight, but I'm very glad that I came.
Great.
It's definitely worth exploring more in the book and giving yourself some reference points. Okay, we've got another question in the chat from Severa. How do you prevent it from becoming arrogance or ignorance?
Yes, good question. By clearly seeing. So we're always stuck in arrogance and ignorance all the time. Right now, everybody is always in arrogance is a judgment. We could say everybody is just ignorant. And seeing these things directly removes that ignorance. So these exercises, it's called the direct path approach, is a way to see this for yourself. And it is only after you've seen it clearly for yourself, beyond doubt, for which this direct path inquiries, for which you can use those, then the ignorance disappears. And only you in the end can be the judge of that. So I don't think anybody else can prevent it from becoming arrogance or ignorance. If that's what's happening in a person, that's what's happening. Just like some people become, I don't know, dictators or Mother Teresa's. So in that sense, we can't stop it. But if somebody is willing to do these practices and look for themselves until they are clear, then this takes away the ignorance. Did that, I don't know if that answered the question, but
Severa, would you like to unmute?
She answered. Yeah. Okay, great.
I think we've got time for one more. Anybody got any last question?
This is Sheila. It seems to me if you focus just on the connectedness and not recognizing the separation at all, that's just as limiting in its own way.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's not what I'm trying to present, or I'm not saying we should only focus on connection. The separation that we experience is a natural part of reality. We will always experience life as a separate body. So I think we don't have to worry about, losing separation and seeing only connection. I think that would be a kind of, I don't know, maybe a psychosis or something. I think it's much harder to see connection and let go of separation a little bit. So I'm not, that's not a worry I have, but maybe you have different experience.
It may be more complicated to see both.
It's not my experience. It's not an either or thing. So what it actually can look like is I experience separation. I'm now talking to a different person in the reality of things, the way I experience the universe and my reality. And at the same time, I can know without a doubt that there is only connection. So in that sense, from that understanding, I'm now speaking to myself. We are speaking to each other. There's only oneness. So you can know both of these at the same time and still operate like a normal human being. It's a perceptual, it's a shift in understanding that doesn't really change. Your reality doesn't become different, but how you experience it does, because you've understood something more. Does that make sense?
I think we're coming at it from different directions to the point where it would be a much longer conversation than the couple of minutes we have.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, the slides are in the deck, Sheila, so you're welcome to go and explore them and possibly rewatch the session and maybe even invest in a copy of the book for yourself.
Right. My concern was more that if the connectedness is something that's new to people, I think that's what the book and this whole thing is about. But if that's already something that you're aware of and have been, then you're coming at it from a different perspective. And I think that would be something where it'd be like talking about angels dancing on the head of a pin,
Okay.
The specificness.
Right. Right. Well, who knows? Maybe we'll have that conversation someday.
Maybe.
Okay, let's bring it to a close, folks. So just a warm round of applause and thanks very much. Katrijn, that was really enjoyable. And I look forward to revisiting it as well. And I will be dipping back in and out the book. I've given myself plenty of reference points, and Anne-Marie's started looking through it as well. So thank you. We've got a couple of more speakers coming up between now and the end of the year. On the 16th of the month, November, I've got Kathleen Walker, and she's going to take us through Living with Your End in Mind. Quite an interesting subject, especially in today's world. She's also the author of this wee book here, exploring content to curiosity and exploring clean language, which I found really interesting. And to close the year off, we've got Kareem Harbert with his 6 business agility, enablers to business agility. So we'll get that one publicised, so you can sign up for that. Is there anybody else got any community announcements that they want to share or share with the group?
Shall I put the slides in the chat again, or will you?
Yeah, you're welcome to do that. And again, we'll share them, and if anybody reaches out directly, we'll send them on as well. We quite often get a few requests.
Okay, I've uploaded them to the chat. So
excellent, thank you. Right, I think we can stop the recording here.